Hello, my name is Louis Fuca, and I am here to talk to you about data security and protection. During this module, we will discuss what data security and protection is, what we are protecting data from, and why we are protecting data. So what is data protection and security? What is its goal? Data security is the process of protecting your most critical business assets, that is your data, against unauthorized or unwanted use. This not only involves deploying the right data security products, but also combining people and processes with the technology you choose to protect data throughout its lifecycle. Enterprise data protection is a team sport. Let's talk about data security and protection in context of the confidentiality, integrity, availability, or CIA triad. You must protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data at rest and in transit from intentional and unintentional attacks. What does all this mean? Let's start with the difference between data at rest and data in transit. Data in transit is data that is being transmitted from one point to another. The transmission may take place over a network, between people, from here to the next building, or halfway around the globe. Data at rest is data that resides on endpoints. Such endpoints include database servers, file servers, laptops, or mobile devices like tablets, where data is being stored for intended later use. It also includes backup devices like tape storage. How about data confidentiality? Confidentiality means maintaining data secrecy. This means that data access is restricted to those actors who have a right to know the data. Confidentiality includes the concept of privacy, but also means providing the right level of access to the right set of users at the right times using the right methods. As an example, consider a university dealing with the data related to a college-aged adult student. That student may have authorized the parents to view financial records in order to pay tuition bills, but that does not mean the parents are legally authorized to view grades and academic progress. The student may themselves be authorized to view their grades and academic progress, but certainly not delete or edit them. The student's instructor may be authorized to view, edit, and delete information corresponding to grades and academic progress, but only when that student is enrolled in an instructor's class. And even then, the instructor will probably not be legally allowed to view the student's financial information. Additionally, the instructor may be restricted to viewing the student's academic progress from authorized endpoints, such as a registered laptop connected through a virtual private network, not a smartphone connecting over an untrusted cellular network. Now let's turn to integrity of data. Ensuring the integrity of the data means making sure that the data is trustworthy and accurate, in that it has not been tampered with. Integrity overlaps with confidentiality, in that only those allowed to change data are permitted to do so. In the case of our college student, a small number of actors should be allowed to change a grade, much smaller than even the limited audience that is allowed to view academic progress. Perhaps only a single instructor, or perhaps a teaching assistant or two. Indeed, defining who is allowed to change, insert, or delete data is a significant challenge in ensuring integrity. Another challenge is working with parties outside of your organization. When our students' parents pay tuition using electronic banking, they want to be assured that the process is secure from tampering. A breach of security will be seen as at least partially the fault of the university, even if it takes place on a network or an endpoint that the university cannot control. Then there is availability. Data must be accessible by the appropriate users during the correct times. This does not always mean right away, nor does it mean that the data has to be available continuously. However, the data must be available within a reasonable amount of time. This will vary according to application. Take one example. The student must have academic progress information available when registering for a course. The information need not be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but it must be available when the student is registered with a response time that provides the student ample time to complete registration actions. The same sort of information must be available to the student when looking for a job or applying to a graduate school. However, the time frame may be different. In this case, being able to respond in days rather than seconds will be acceptable. However, it is expected that the data be accessed years or even decades after it is created. Availability, to a greater degree than confidentiality and integrity, is affected by unintentional actors and third parties. Remember, data may need to be available for years or even decades. As an example, a natural disaster may jeopardize data availability either temporarily by cutting network connections, longer term by damaging application and database servers, or long term by destroying archived data. A planned network outage may inadvertently cut ties to access data. Carelessness can cause loss of backup tapes or drop a table from a database. There's also a different time frame in which breaches are discovered. Without careful data protection measures, violations of confidentiality or integrity may escape detection for weeks, months, or years. Availability violations tend to be discovered quicker, but not always, as in the case of losing a backup tape. So what are we protecting data against? Data must be protected against deliberate and inadvertent or accidental attacks. When we think of data security and protection, our first inclination may be to think of only deliberate attacks, attacks by bad actors who wish to purposely compromise our system and damage or steal our data. And deliberate attacks are certainly worth our concern. Deliberate attacks can come in a variety of forms, such as a denial of service, socially engineered attacks, attacks from internal sources such as privileged administrators or users, as well as attacks from external sources. Attackers can have a widely varying level of skill, from inexperienced script kiddies who use tools or methods that they do not really understand, to motivated disciplined criminals, to agencies of nation states with a higher level of skill and many resources. Returning to our example, the university system may be preyed upon by disgruntled employees, bored students trying to crack the system, more motivated students trying to facilitate cheating or change grades, outside criminals attempting to gain and exploit personal credit card information, or even foreign national agencies making a coordinated effort to steal valuable research. However, inadvertent breaches can be just as bad. These include such events such as failure of hardware, of weather or other natural disaster, or even innocent mistakes by well-intentioned personnel, or poorly implemented or insufficient procedures. Threat profiles are used to predict what sorts of threats, intentional and unintentional, might pose a threat to data, and what measures should be reasonably considered to protect the data. This ties into the next point. Why do all of this? Understanding the costs of attacks is important. This is challenging because some of these costs are difficult to quantify. You want to protect revenue and profits. Compromise of data can cut into revenue, and cleaning up after an attack adds costs, cutting profits. Also important is the reputation of your organization. Additionally, data protection and security solutions may be part of a digital transformation effort. Your organization may be moving services online or even creating new service offerings. Data protection is part of the foundation on which these transformative efforts can build. You must also consider regulatory mandates. Laws may impose stiff penalties on data breaches, above and beyond the intrinsic costs of repairing the damage. Industry standards may be less directly punitive, but may be a de facto requirement for your customers to do business with you. Data protection and security are expected. Security breaches can be devastating to a company's reputation. One tenet of security is not to spend more on security than an asset is worth. But in the case of brand or reputation, this worth can be very difficult to assess. We see data security and protection are necessary, but they are also challenging. In the next segment, we'll talk about the top challenges and common pitfalls of data security. Hello, my name is Louis Fuca, and in this section, we will discuss data security challenges. We will go over some of the top common challenges of data security and protection. Then, we will look more closely at 4 industries and their unique challenges. There are many challenges to keeping your data safe and secure. Here are 4 challenges that C-level executives face when ensuring their organization has a comprehensive, workable data security solution. They include explosive data growth, new privacy regulations, operational complexity, and a cybersecurity skills shortage. Explosive data growth. Not only are businesses continuously accumulating data, the rate of data accumulation is increasing. Data is coming in from new sources, new types of sources, and each source has its own data protection, privacy, and security requirements. As an example, the data gathered from mobile phones used to be almost exclusively about which calls were made and when, as well as text messages. As phones got smarter and more connected, new types of data emerged. With the advent of inexpensive global positioning system sensors, it became easy to track location. Improvements in one type of technology would leverage other types of technology. Phone cameras could take pictures, but at first they had to be downloaded onto a secondary device before they could be shared widely. The increase in inexpensive and ubiquitous bandwidth encouraged users to take and share more pictures and videos. It also allowed surreptitious monitoring. The ability to run an application meant more data sharing and more opportunity for background data gathering. As an example, fitness applications could gather health information. More troubling, a game application could surreptitiously gather information not related to the game. All this data must be protected from inappropriate use. As an example, automated red light cameras used for enforcing traffic regulations also gather time location information for vehicles of law-abiding citizens. This data needs to be subject to privacy and protection requirements as well. So, keeping up with a growing number and variety of data sources providing data across multiple contexts adds layers of complexity to the data security challenge. Related to this explosive growth in data is the increase in new privacy regulations. Concerns about data security and privacy have given rise to new legal requirements. These regulations vary in their scope and focus. Many of them overlap. However, they carry the force of law, and failure to comply can bring significant penalties, even if there is no data breach. In addition, when a data security breach occurs, and no security protection solution can be perfect, security breaches are inevitable. It is critical to be able to have a security solution that is legally defensible. That is, it complied with applicable regulations. Furthermore, different regions and different regulatory agencies have their own sets of regulations. The General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, was created to protect the privacy of individuals in the European Union. It applies not only to organizations based in the EU, but also multinational organizations and even organizations entirely outside of the EU that offer goods and services to people in the EU or just monitor the behavior of EU citizens. The California Consumer Protection Act, or CCPA, has requirements that overlap but do not fully coincide with the GDPR. It applies to a different set of organizations than the GDPR. Therefore, it is possible to leverage some of the measures taken to comply with the GDPR to implement CCPA compliance. However, there will be some differences. The future will bring new measures by other governments. Brazil's LGPD is scheduled to become effective soon. Some predict the United States of America will implement an overarching data security and protection regulation on the federal level soon. Complying with these new regulations can be a daunting task. Besides these regulations, there are data standards that may not have the force of law behind them, but which are expected by your customers or are necessary to comply with to prove due diligence in case of a breach or legal action. An organization must implement the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, or PCI DSS, in order to do business with major credit card brands. The next challenge we will address is operational complexity. An organization's critical business systems may span many different departments and be interwoven with other business systems and applications. Movement to cloud and the adoption of big data technologies increases capabilities, but also increases operational complexity and introduces more points of vulnerability. Critical business systems probably rely on crucial tools and resources from a variety of third-party vendors. These tools and resources have their own points of vulnerability, many of which are out of the direct control of your organization. One way in which operational complexity affects data security and protection is in determining who oversees various aspects of data security and which roles have which responsibilities and authority. A key tenet of effective data security is the need for one role which has overall responsibility for data security and the authority to implement necessary measures. The corporate culture may resist this consolidation of authority and transition to a centralized data security model. Cross-silo coordination is both necessary and difficult. To implement a useful data security solution, you must enact meaningful and effective policies and procedures, not only for the many points of focus in the organization, but for third parties as well. Data security may drive operational strategy. As an example, you may decide that keeping certain types of data in a third-party cloud is too risky, necessitating a movement to bring that function back internally to a private cloud, or moving to a more reliable vendor. This can lead to friction within an organization. As an example, a vulnerability assessment audit must function in the context of change management and will generally have to be carefully planned to mesh with business requirements. You may not be able to just shut down a database server right away to fix a data security problem. You must wait until a scheduled outage and receive the buy-in of asset stakeholders, such as database managers and business managers that depend on that database server to generate revenue. Addressing the security of that database will take place over multiple iterations, each iteration targeted towards the most pressing issues, with changes and the resulting security improvements carefully managed and documented. So, we have explosive data growth. That means more data to manage and protect. We have new privacy regulations, so we have new policies and procedures to implement, more auditing reports to be generated and reviewed. We have operational complexity, which means complex, resource-intensive projects to plan and implement. And who do we have to do all this? We have a cybersecurity skills shortage, not just now, but for the foreseeable future. We must plan for this. Cybersecurity is hard. It requires trustworthy, skilled, experienced people. People with not just technological skills, but people skills, because data security is ultimately about people, and we need people to do all this. We need security professionals that are adaptable, compliant, dependable, inquisitive, and resilient. We need to seek these people from all sources, inside and outside the cybersecurity industry. We need to invest in these people and innovate new ways of facilitating their development. We need to focus on skills and a whole new set of credentials besides traditional college degrees. We cannot expect the government or the workforce itself to be able to fulfill this need. Traditional educational institutions are trying and struggling to fill the gap. We need to help them in this struggle. Innovative training resources, such as IBM's own Security Learning Academy, can help address this problem. Finally, you must leverage the people you have to get the most out of them. This means buying top quality tools and automating processes as much as practical. So, we have talked about 4 top challenges. And remember, there are more challenges than this. We have just started with these 4. In the next segment, we are going to talk about some common pitfalls. Hello. In previous sections, we have discussed what data security and protection is, what we are protecting against, and why we are doing all of this. We have also discussed some top challenges. In this segment, we will discuss some of the common pitfalls in data security. Important to note that this is not a comprehensive list of pitfalls. Also, it addresses them from a high level, rather than getting down into technical details. The first pitfall to consider is the failure to move beyond compliance. We talked about compliance with privacy regulations as one of the top challenges. Well, compliance with laws, regulations, and commonly accepted industry standards is a start, but it is not enough. Our most important goal is to reduce the risk of security breaches. That means reducing the likelihood of security failures and minimizing the cost of recovering from security breaches. Now, regulation compliance is an important part of that. Regulation and standard compliance efforts can provide a foundation on which to plan and implement a data security protection solution, reducing the likelihood of security failures. Additionally, regulations and standards may address what measures must be put in place to deal with security breaches when they occur. And providing regulatory compliance is a big part of establishing due diligence. But our organizations have unique data security requirements, and the responsibility to meet these requirements ultimately lays with us. We likely have data assets that are not addressed by the regulatory standards, but which still are valuable and are at risk if not protected. Failure to move beyond compliance is short-sighted. Furthermore, regulations and standards do not keep up with an ever-changing and evolving threat environment. We need to be far-sighted and proactive in aggressively identifying, modeling, and preparing for existing threats while researching, educating ourselves about, and predicting future threats. We cannot afford to wait and let the laws, regulations, and standards catch up with the threats. That will never happen. Ideally, we should be at a point of readiness where we can inform and contribute to the future evolution of standards and regulation. Good risk assessment, a continuing and iterative vulnerability assessment program, and sensible control measures take us beyond checking the box for regulatory compliance to a culture where we drive the solution. Another pitfall is the failure to recognize the need for centralized data security. Organizational data and IT structure tends to be siloed and distributed. It is easy, especially in the complex operational environments, to assume that the other guy has security covered, or to take a see no evil or everything's fine so far approach. These attitudes can lead to critical gaps in security coverage, and worse, finger pointing when the inevitable breach occurs. Organizations must make data security a priority, invest overall responsibility in a single supervisory, high-level role on or near the executive level. This senior manager must have the authority to determine and implement necessary security strategy. Generally, the senior manager for security is not the CEO, but rather a full-time job that reports directly to the CEO, or at least the CIO. Full support of the CEO and other high-level positions for this role is essential. This role defines the vision for security and makes sure it is brought to reality. The role also understands that the threat environment evolves and grows. New types and sources of data must be quickly integrated into the overall data security and protection solution. That means the solution must be flexible enough to adapt to these changes. Appropriate products must be implemented that allow central management of security policies. The organization should have some sort of security intelligence and event management, or SIEM, solution to centralize alerts and coordinate mitigation measures. Auditing solutions must be set up to allow a comprehensive, rigorous view of the data security situation throughout the organization. Associated with failure to centralize is the failure to define who owns responsibility for the data itself. It is necessary, but not enough, to have an overall security manager. We must also define explicitly and in detail who has responsibility for sensitive data assets. Many standards and regulations call for the explicit creation of a Chief Data Officer, CDO, or Data Protection Officer, DPO, whose full-time job is just that. They will often report directly to the overall security manager. This CDO or DPO must be technically qualified and understand lines of business. They must assess risk and develop a comprehensive data security strategy at the technical level. A fourth pitfall is the failure to address known vulnerabilities. We might envision that cybercriminals use secret vulnerabilities, unknown to anyone other than themselves and other illicit actors. However, the vast majority of exploits use known vulnerabilities. Malware and ransomware targets vulnerabilities at least 6 months old. These are often vulnerabilities for which patches already exist and are widely known. Vulnerabilities for which patches existed have accounted for many high-level breaches. Think about it. The vulnerability was known, the patch existed, yet the breach still occurred. But while necessary to patch quickly, it can be difficult. You must have an accurate inventory of products you use. You need detailed technical knowledge of the vulnerable products. You must test patches to ensure they work and do not break existing functionality. You must have a plan to install the patches. You must know the status of resources procured from third-party partners. As an example, if you use a cloud service in your business system, you must understand the cloud environment and work with the cloud provider to ensure that critical components are protected from known risks. This requires understanding what data assets you have and what baseline state should be expected. You must implement a program of frequent vulnerability assessment scans. This means coordinating with line of business owners and other stakeholders, and a robust change and configuration management program. Finally, there is the pitfall of failing to prioritize and leverage data activity monitoring. After discovering, classifying, assigning responsibility, implementing compliance measures, analyzing threats, and placing appropriate access controls and protocols on data, it is tempting to consider the job done. But you are defending your data, and any good defense requires continued and active monitoring. Monitoring data access is difficult technically. Out of billions of transactions, only a few might be suspicious. Filtering activity data in order to process it is a challenge. CPU, RAM, network bandwidth, and disk must be used as efficiently as practical to keep the monitoring solution from overwhelming the resources available. Furthermore, you must put in measures to monitor privileged users. Even figuring out what to monitor and how to monitor it can be daunting. But this is critical. Data is especially vulnerable to inside attacks, such as those from privileged users, whether it is a malicious action by a disgruntled employee or an outside actor using a compromised privileged account. There are many facets of monitoring data activity, including blocking or quarantining users performing suspicious activities, identification of outliers that might signify illicit activity, masking data in real time, preserving data for audit, and integrating with event consoles to notify response teams in a timely manner. To meet this challenge, we must use a stepped approach, starting with the most sensitive data sources, perhaps just one or two, and targeting other data sources in their turn. Iteration will allow you to incorporate new data sources into your monitoring scheme, as well as refine monitoring policies. Identify high-risk user accounts and turn off or restrict unneeded access points. Monitor holistically, tracking not only databases but sensitive data in files, Hadoop, NoSQL, and cloud platforms. Use the data gleaned from monitoring to produce useful reports and set up a process for distributing these reports to stakeholders for careful audit. In summary, we have discussed 5 leading pitfalls and how to guard against them. In the next segment, we will discuss industry-specific challenges. Hello. This segment deals with industry-specific data security challenges. In this segment, we will focus on 4 industries with specific data security needs. You will learn about the unique data security and protection challenges for healthcare, transportation, financial and insurance markets, and retail industries. Each industry has its own unique data security challenges. Often, there are specific regulations for an industry that must be complied with. Malicious actors understand the unique vulnerabilities of these industries, and so should you. Let us start with the healthcare industry. The healthcare industry stores a combination of sensitive information, including personal health information and payment card data. Both are vulnerable to inadvertent as well as deliberate misuse. That means we must implement processes and procedures that promote safe handling of information, provide safeguards for the imperfection of even well-intentioned humans, and provide a path for dealing with security breaches quickly and effectively when they occur. This must balance with the requirements to provide quick and reliable access to necessary personal health information across various parts of an organization and even between healthcare entities. As an example, a patient suffering from a heart attack needs emergency medical technicians, emergency room doctors, cardiologists, nurses, and medical technicians to be able to input, edit, and view health data in an environment where minutes, even seconds, count. But that data also must be shared with a primary care provider and with designated family members, as well as insurance companies. It may even need to be shared with a government entity, such as a national health insurance program. Yet at the same time, a heart attack patient has a right to privacy. The boundaries may be unclear. Perhaps a spouse has need for access, but due to a family situation, a sibling must be explicitly excluded. The healthcare industry is also subject to strict data protection regulations. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA, regulates the privacy and security of certain types of health information. The healthcare industry is also subject to financial standards and regulations, such as Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, or PCI DSS, due to payment information being processed. Finally, healthcare can reach across state or national boundaries, requiring compliance with regional or national standards as well. Healthcare has the highest cost per breach record, about triple the average cost, making data security protection vital to maintain the financial soundness of a medical organization. Data security is critical to keep the business viable and to meet regulatory requirements. Now let us consider transportation. As a critical part of national and regional infrastructure, transportation presents its own challenges. Transportation data security requirements meld government and private sectors. Sensitive data may run a confusing gamut through multiple vendors and government agencies, making it difficult to determine who holds final responsibility. The IT infrastructure is generally widely distributed. Take the example of a toll road. It may pass through multiple governmental jurisdictions on the local, county, state, and even national level. Assets may be government owned, but managed by private companies. Services from multiple regions must be integrated to provide a single seamless offering. As an example, a smart card that works on one transit system may be expected to work on another that is physically co-located but managed by a totally different entity. Sensitive data, including license plate numbers and payment card information, are vulnerable to abuse. Should toll card information be available to traffic enforcement authorities? A red light camera will capture sensitive location information for law-abiding citizens as well as red light violators. How is that data to be stored and separated? Civil liberties and personal rights considerations must be considered. It is much harder to identify or designate a central responsible authority in many transportation entities. Centralized solutions are harder, if not impossible, to implement. Data must be protected as it transits the system, as well as at rest. Now let us turn to financial industries and insurance. There's a story that American bank robber Willie Sutton was asked why he robbed banks, and he replied, "Because that's where the money is." This story, now considered to be apocryphal, gets to the crux of the challenge with financial industries. Not surprisingly, financial services and insurance are the most targeted industry, with 19% of total cyber attacks in 2018. This sector handles highly sensitive data. Both internal and external actors have strong motivation to steal, change, and improperly exploit data. At the same time, customers want personalized, seamless digital management of assets. They want to reliably sell or trade stocks and mutual funds. They want to be able to pay bills, deposit checks, and transfer money between banks or credit unions. When they go to an automated teller machine, they want to be able to withdraw money no matter which financial institution owns the machine. We are also witnessing the rise of mobile payment applications, another example of how consumer demand is driving the industry to provide services that must have proper data security and protection measures in place. There are many industry-specific regulations and standards. We have already mentioned the payment card industry data security standard. Additionally, there are other regulations, standards, and entities, such as the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority Incorporated, FINRA, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, SOX, and Basel I, II, or III, just to name a few examples. A financial services company may have to comply with regional standards, such as the New York Department of Financial Services Regulation 23 NYCRR 500 regulation on cybersecurity, as well as national and international regulations and standards. Additionally, lost business is the biggest contributor to this sector's data breach costs. Customers will not do business with a company that they do not trust. Finally, let us look at the retail industry. Retail organizations are highly targeted. There are many opportunities for data theft and exposure due to the many access points in the retail data cycle. Internet of Things, IoT devices such as distributed points of sale must be integrated into the data security solution. Data must be protected in transit. Low profit margins also make cost reduction and streamline operations important. Retail companies may look to cloud-based offerings. Customers want personalization of their retail experience while still maintaining privacy and security. This requires data, but the more data a retailer collects and uses, the more vulnerability and risk they take on. PCI DSS compliance is an important factor in this environment. In this section, we have examined industry-specific concerns. In the next section, we will address the 12 critical data protection capabilities. Welcome back. In previous videos, we addressed the need for data security and protection, and some of the challenges and pitfalls. Now, let us examine what capabilities a data security and protection solution should have. Our objectives are to examine the 12 critical data protection capabilities. These are the top 12 data protection capabilities. They are data discovery, data classification, vulnerability assessment, data risk analysis, data and file activity monitoring, real-time alerting, blocking, masking, and quarantining, active analytics, encryption, tokenization, key management, and automated compliance reporting. We will examine each of these in more detail. The first capability of a data protection solution is data discovery. You cannot reliably protect what you do not know about. You must know where your data lives. You must have some process for seeking out databases and file systems in your enterprise that might potentially contain sensitive or regulated data. Note the word potentially. With this capability, you are not classifying data, you are finding it. Data discovery will be performed iteratively, both because of new data sources that are always cropping up in a dynamic IT environment, and also to capture previously overlooked sources of data. The output of this capability is a catalog or inventory of data sources. You will probably use multiple means to find this data. This means a cross-silo comprehensive effort that requires high-level buy-in and C-level executive support. You will need a lot of cooperation and trust. The capability must be able to find production data sources used for development and testing, and unauthorized data sources. One means of discovery is to ask people, such as line of business owners, database administrators, and network administrators. Another method is to employ tools to perform scans of the networks and individual servers. The goal here is to cast as wide a net as possible. you want to find all the data sources in your organization, not just the data you should have or think you have. Sensitive data may exist beyond the knowledge of the data owner. This is a common, yet an extremely unsafe and vulnerable scenario. You cannot protect sensitive data unless you know it exists. Data classification parses discovered data and matches it against patterns or keywords to determine the nature and sensitivity of it. Assign labels or keywords based on data type. This will make it possible to apply the correct security policies to the data. Not all data will be sensitive data, and different types of sensitive data must be treated in different ways. Classification allows you to determine what protective measures apply to which data. A data classification scheme should consider the standards and regulations relevant to an organization, as well as unique organizational needs. Remember, some data may fall under multiple classifications. Your data security solution requires some means to discover and address the vulnerabilities in your hardware, software, and networks that host the data. This method should address the process in a consistent fashion and should be automated. This solution should assess the system configuration against a recommended state or baseline, determining areas of weakness. Such areas may include user accounts that should be disabled but are not, inappropriate privileges, insecure authentication methods, shared accounts, misconfigured configuration files, and missing security patches. Vulnerability assessment should be an iterative process which uses input from stakeholders to determine priority of focus. Rather than trying to fix all vulnerabilities at once, it should use a phased approach to address the most urgent risks, with an eye towards constant improvement. Vulnerability assessment requires coordination and buy-in across departments. Therefore, it requires high-level support, careful gathering of metrics and progress reporting, and integration with change and configuration management processes. The results of data classification and vulnerability assessment allow you to perform data risk analysis. This is where you assign risk levels to data sources and use that assignment to prioritize allocation of resources to the most appropriate efforts. Risk analysis considers not only what type of data you have, but what threats pertain to the data source, the probability of that threat, and the amount of damage that threat would cause, as well as methods to counter the threat and the cost of the mitigation procedures. This process can be difficult. However, it is important for the organization to understand the risks associated with their businesses. There are tools and frameworks that can assist with risk quantification. Risk analysis results feed back into the data discovery, classification, and vulnerability assessment capabilities to refine those processes. Risk analysis also helps in planning policies for monitoring data assets. Active monitoring of your sensitive data is critical to detect suspicious activity and security breaches in a timely manner. A 2018 study by IBM showed that the average time to identify a data breach was 197 days. That is correct, more than half a year. Imagine the exploitation of data that can occur in that time. Think of the damage to an organization's reputation when the data breach is finally discovered and disclosed. Active monitoring, properly deployed, can reduce the time to discover data breaches. Activity monitoring is challenging. From a business perspective, you must use the results of risk analysis to develop a set of monitoring policies, targeting the highest risk data sources first, then iteratively moving to other priorities. This requires close cross-silo coordination and communication. Line of business owners, as well as database, server, application, and network administrators must be consulted. From a technical perspective, data activity monitoring requires filtering a huge number of database transactions, perhaps billions per day, to pick out a handful of events that indicate possible suspicious activity. This can be extremely resource intensive, and the monitoring solution must be carefully configured to avoid overtaxing CPU, RAM, disk, and network resources. The monitoring solution must address varied methods of accessing data, remotely or locally, by an internal privileged user, or an external attacker, or even a misconfigured application. Data activity monitoring is also iterative. Results from data activity monitoring feed into vulnerability assessment and risk analysis, which in turn provides insight on refining monitoring policies. Real-time alerting involves acting quickly and appropriately on suspicious activity identified by data monitoring. Alerting requires the consolidation and centralization of relevant information, correlation with data from other security solutions, and reliable routing of that information to parties that can act on it. The alerting process must be automated and reliable. Integration with security intelligence and event management consoles is a must. In this video, we have discussed the first 6 data security capabilities. In the next segment, we will continue our discussion of data security capabilities. Hello again. In the last video, we started to talk about the 12 critical data protection capabilities. We covered data discovery, data classification, vulnerability assessment, data risk analysis, data and file activity monitoring, and real-time alerting. In this video, we will discuss the 6 remaining critical data protection capabilities. To review, the top 12 critical data protection capabilities are data discovery, data classification, vulnerability assessment, data risk analysis, data and file activity monitoring, real-time alerting, blocking, masking, and quarantining, active analytics, encryption, tokenization, key management, and automated compliance reporting. Let's talk about blocking, masking, and quarantining. A data security solution must also intelligently limit access to sensitive data on the fly. When the security solution detects suspicious actions, it is useful to respond by obscuring data and/or hindering further action. These responses include blocking, masking, and quarantining. These measures are useful for complying with standards and regulations by limiting users to only the level of access to data necessary for their roles. Blocking prevents a suspicious data request from being completed. This request may be to view, change, add, or delete sensitive information. Blocking is fine-grained in that it pertains to individual requests. Since the request is blocked, no data is affected or returned to the requester. The process just fails to complete. Perhaps, however, you do not want to totally block a request, but still want to modify how the requester interacts with the data. In this case, either the request can be modified or the data returned can be modified. In the case of masking, data is partially returned, but portions of the data are omitted. As an example, a request to view personal identification number entries may return values that have some digits replaced with asterisks. Or perhaps only a partial list of results may be returned. For instance, a request to view salary information may yield results that exclude executive salaries. Query modification, on the other hand, modifies the actual command being sent to the database server. This might direct the command to a different table or a different column. Quarantining is an action taken towards the user who generates suspicious activity. It terminates access to sensitive data either permanently or temporarily. Blocking, masking, quarantining, and query modification are usually combined with alerting and logging actions so that suspicious events may be reported and saved for auditing purposes. These capabilities help prevent data security breaches by not only malicious actors, but also actions due to human error, or even in the faithful execution of required actions. As an example, a privileged database administrator may be troubleshooting a problem which requires executing a query against a database table that contains sensitive information. The administrator neither needs nor desires to view this data. Masking hides the sensitive data from the administrator while allowing the administrator to see if the query works. Active analytics take the data generated by data activity monitoring and use them to generate insights about threats. These threats might include SQL injections, malicious stored procedures, denial of service, data leakage, account takeover, schema tampering, data tampering, or other anomalies. When these threats are identified, active analytics can provide recommendations for countermeasures to the threats in order to reduce risk. Encryption is the process of transforming data into an unintelligible form in such a way that the original data can only be obtained by using a decryption process. Encryption does not deny unauthorized users access to the data, it denies them the meaning behind or the understanding of the data. Thus, the encrypted data is useless to the unauthorized user. Encryption may so obscure the meaning of the data that it is not even recognizable as data, effectively hiding its very existence. Encryption can be applied to data in transit, that is, while it is traveling from one endpoint to another, or at rest, that is, while it resides on an endpoint. Since data has different vulnerabilities in transit than it does at rest, the requirements and methods for encrypting data may be different. As an example, a scheme for encrypting data in transit may prioritize speed and minimizing resources used in the encryption-decryption process. Data at rest may prioritize strength of the encryption and long-term preservation of the encryption state, as well as ensuring that decryption remains viable for the life of the data. Symmetric encryption is where the decryption key is easily derivable from the encryption key. This requires that the key be protected from disclosure, but symmetric encryption is generally faster and less resource-intensive. Asymmetric encryption is where the decryption key is not easily derivable from the encryption key. In this case, the encryption key can be made public, but the decryption key must remain private and protected from disclosure. Encrypted data only becomes useful when decrypted. Both encryption and decryption require keys. These keys are themselves sensitive data which must be managed and secured. Tokenization is like encryption in that it attempts to hide the meaning of the data from unauthorized users. However, instead of encrypting the data, tokenization substitutes the data with a token. This token, issued by a trusted party, can be accessed but not redeemed by untrusted parties. Therefore, operations that do not require the specific sensitive data can be performed with the token as a proxy. This might include passing the token from actor to actor, or using the token as a voucher. When the original data is required, the token is redeemed. In this example, a shopper wants to make a purchase in a store. Rather than provide their sensitive credit card information to the shopkeeper's point of sale, the shopper requests a token from a trusted server and provides that to the shopkeeper instead. The shopkeeper is able to handle the token, but is unable to map it back to the credit card number. To complete the sale, the shopkeeper queries a merchant acquirer whether the token is good for the sale amount, and the merchant acquirer in turn queries the remote token service server about the validity of the token. After receiving a reply from the server, the merchant acquirer verifies that the token is good for the purchase. The remote token service server then matches the amount of the sale to the original data and updates the bank card issuer with the details of the sale. As we have seen, encryption requires keys. These keys must be created, managed, and protected from disclosure. Keys are also used for authentication and other purposes. The multitude and complexity of keys requires that your organization must have a key management capability. Key management must be centralized. Key management must be organized in order to maintain data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Improperly exposed keys compromise data confidentiality and integrity, while lack of access to keys by authorized users compromises availability. Since one goal of data security and protection is compliance with applicable regulations and standards, we must understand the requirements of these regulations and how to translate these requirements into processes, policies, and procedures in our data security solution. Automated compliance support includes pre-built classification patterns to help us identify sensitive data covered by the regulations. It provides pre-configured reports that gather and display the data required by the regulations. It provides workflows to implement mandated processes and procedures. It provides auditing resources and repositories to prove compliance. Implementing compliance with even a single standard from scratch would require so many resources that the cost would be prohibitive. Out-of-the-box pre-configured resources make the job feasible. In summary, we have discussed the last 6 data security capabilities. In the next segment, we will discuss the Guardium data security solution. Hello again, and welcome back. We have investigated the motivations, challenges, and pitfalls of data security and protection, and discussed the top capabilities of a good data security solution. In this video, we will explore IBM Security Guardium, IBM's solution to achieve smarter data security with visibility, automation, and scalability. We will talk about IBM Security Guardium Data Encryption and IBM Security Key Lifecycle Manager. We will also visit the IBM Security Learning Academy and look at 2 labs for future learning. Guardium is a powerful data security and compliance solution that supports a staged implementation. This allows customers to implement increasing functionality, starting with the most urgent issues and growing to expand coverage. Customers can start with basic and acute compliance needs, such as data access reports required by auditors or regulation. Then they can expand coverage to other sensitive platforms, control and monitor the access of privileged administrators, seek out sensitive data throughout the enterprise, and create a comprehensive strategy to protect that data. Guardium helps you protect data against unauthorized access, ensure data privacy, identify risk, and reduce the cost of compliance. Guardium addresses data sources on-premise or in the cloud. It works with database servers, distributed data repositories, and unstructured data such as sensitive documents and files. Guardium provides the following capabilities: database discovery and classification, unstructured data discovery and classification, vulnerability assessment, real-time database access monitoring, real-time unstructured data monitoring, real-time alerting, blocking, masking, session termination, quarantining, and query rewriting actions, built-in and custom reporting, compliance workflow automation, out-of-the-box and custom reporting, compliance accelerators for industry regulations and standards, including GDPR, SOX, Basel II, and HIPAA, configuration auditing, and active threat analytics. Guardium provides a complete solution to a company's monitoring needs. It uses few database server resources, typically 3% to 5% CPU utilization, reducing the impact on the database system operations. Guardium is implemented such that database administrators and privileged database users with high levels of access to the data itself have no access to Guardium. Because Guardium intercepts database queries before they reach the database and intercepts query results before they are passed to the requester, data access can be blocked or reported, and data can be masked. Guardium works consistently in heterogeneous database environments. This allows for standardization of policies, procedures, and which data is collected and reported on. Additionally, a single Guardium system can monitor and manage the security of different vendor database products. Guardium can also monitor Amazon AWS RDS database engines. To provide heterogeneous support for databases and applications, Guardium uses host-based probes by a distributed agent called the STAP. This provides lightweight cross-platform support. Because the STAP agent runs on database servers, at a low level below the databases and applications, all access is monitored, unlike network monitoring, which does not detect activity running solely on the database server. For example, a privileged user working locally on the server console will not be detected by any solution that only monitors network traffic, but would be detected and could be monitored or even blocked by Guardium. Also, because STAP runs at a level below the database and application, no changes to the database or applications are required when you install STAP. Separate collector and aggregator appliances provide most of the resource-intensive processing, allowing the database servers themselves to run with a minimum of interference. Activity is logged in real time and is immediately available for alerting or reporting. Additionally, the strings are parsed into smaller data elements so that activity information is easier to categorize and build reports on. Parsing is done in real time by default, but can be deferred to a later time for resource utilization issues. Alerts happen in real time. Guardium uses a tiered hierarchy of collectors, aggregators, and a central manager. Collectors gather and parse activity about sensitive data from data repositories, provide real-time analysis, and store it for further processing. A Guardium implementation has at least one, and generally many more than one, collector. Aggregators collect and merge information from multiple collectors. This provides an enterprise view of sensitive data operations. Guardium implementations with more than a few collectors have one or more aggregators. A Guardium environment has one central management system, which controls and monitors all collectors and aggregators in that environment and provides a holistic view through a single console. Centralized management provides uniformity of policies, which can be created once and distributed to many diverse endpoints. Centralized aggregation gathers data security information from distributed sources for unified processing, storage, and reporting. Heterogeneous data source support provides similar security capabilities for different sorts of data repositories. IBM Security Guardium Data Encryption is an integrated suite of highly scalable products. It helps minimize risk and reduce operational costs of encryption key management. It provides encryption for files, databases, applications, and cloud container data. It also provides tokenization and cloud key management capabilities, including key storage, rotation, and lifecycle management. It will secure data assets across the enterprise, including cloud, virtual, big data, and on-premise environments. It provides support for regulatory compliance efforts. IBM Security Key Lifecycle Manager provides encryption key management capabilities. It supports multi-master clustering, allowing synchronization and real-time delivery of keys to increase flexibility and ease of use. It simplifies security key lifecycles, including generation, distribution, and lifecycle management, reducing costs. It can be simply and securely integrated with IBM storage systems. Finally, I would like to draw your attention to some Guardium labs available on the IBM Security Learning Academy at www.securitylearningacademy.com. Let us examine the Guardium area of the Academy. There are roadmaps for getting started with Guardium, for Guardium users, and for Guardium administrators. These roadmaps are excellent stepping off points for building on what you have learned in this video series. Two excellent labs are here. Guardium Database Vulnerability Assessment is a foundational level course. It contains an explanatory video, a lab guide, and a virtual lab environment. Returning to the roadmap, another excellent lab is creating a Guardium query and report. It has a lab guide and a virtual lab environment. In summary, we have discussed IBM Security Guardium products and previewed the Guardium section of the IBM Security Learning Academy. Thank you for your time and attention.
In this video, we're going to go over mobile endpoint protection. We'll learn about the two major mobile operating systems and their differences, understand the primary vulnerabilities, weak points, and backdoors, learn more about security options available for mobile devices, and understand what mobile endpoint management entails day to day. There are two major mobile operating systems on the market right now, iOS and Android. In the past, there have been some others, such as Windows Phone, and really the one that kind of introduced mobile to the enterprise, BlackBerry. But right now, iOS and Android make up most of the devices on the market. Windows is officially end of life, and BlackBerry has started rolling out Android as their primary operating system. iOS was developed by Apple exclusively for their products. There are no third-party Apple products running iOS. It was launched in 2007 and is currently on version 13. Despite early proliferation and pop culture appeal, Apple smartphones really only make up about 13% of the devices on the market based on usage. Roughly 60% of the tablets worldwide run iOS or iPadOS, and MDM capabilities have been available since iOS 6. Android began as a small project by Android Inc., a team working on an alternative to Symbian and Windows Mobile OS. Purchased by Google in 2005, it is based on the Linux kernel and is now developed primarily by Google and a consortium known as the Open Handset Alliance. While Google does provide the face of Android in a large variety of the devices on the market, there are non-Google Android devices that are out there floating around for use in various different industries. The first public release was in 2008 and is currently on version 10. Roughly 86% of smartphones and 39% of tablets run some form of Android, and MDM capabilities have been available since Android 2.2. So how do mobile endpoints differ from traditional endpoints such as servers, desktops, and laptops? Well, first, users do not interface directly with the operating system. Unlike traditional desktop software, there is no way for them out of the box to gain root access and see the various components and folders that make up the OS. Instead, a series of applications act as a broker between the user and the operating system. So when you open up the settings on your device, you're not directly editing the settings yourself. The settings is an application that issues commands on your behalf to the operating system to do things like adjusting the system volume. OS stability can be easily monitored because of this, and anomalies reported that present a risk. Unless we're talking about certain open source devices on the Android market, by and large, your consumer devices come out of the box pretty standard. You open it up, you boot it on, the operating system loads in a particular order, a security chain is established, and then the user is presented with the UI where they can run applications. If at any point that system chain is broken, it's pretty easy to tell and report back on. Antivirus software can also be useful. It can see certain applications that are installed on devices and read certain signatures, but unlike on desktops, it can't see all the content. It cannot peek inside all of the applications and see what's there. It's limited in its view and can't be customized to see things that it normally wouldn't be able to see. So what are the primary threats to mobile endpoints? We're going to separate this into three categories: system-based, app-based, and external. System-based threats usually come in the form of trying to alter the operating system in some way to gain access to features that aren't standard on the device. This is usually in the form of jailbreaking and rooting. Jailbreaking is unique to iOS because it's not supported in any way whatsoever. Jailbreaking automatically voids all of your warranties, and your system resources can become maliciously infected in ways that you might not have intended. It's usually done in order to gain access to applications that were not approved or available on the App Store. Rooting is a little bit different on Android because it does have its uses, especially if you're an app developer. And also with Android devices, you can install applications externally without having to root it. But rooting still does present problems, especially if you use it to customize the operating system in such a way that is not previously authorized by Google. You might create vulnerabilities that can be exploited. App-based threats come in the form, of course, of applications. Primarily, we see this as phishing scams via SMS or email. You receive an email or an official-looking text message that contains a link, and you click on it. It can do things to your device that become a security hazard. Malicious code can infect even public applications, so make sure that you're always installing apps from a trusted source. Yes, Apple and Google do a good job of scanning their applications for vulnerabilities, but it doesn't mean they hit all of them. So stick with the companies that you know that they have a history, a proven track record of security. They can also request access to hardware that's irrelevant to their functionality. There's an example from a long time ago of a flashlight application for Android that flipped the camera light on so the device could be used as a flashlight. However, for some reason it needed system access to contacts, for example, which is not something you think that a flashlight app would need. Web browsers also contain vulnerabilities. I'm sure a lot of people have seen when you go to particular sites, a pop-up might show up in your browser that says that your device has been infected, and just click on this link to go ahead and get a program that can resolve it for you. Trust me when I say that Apple and Google aren't putting those kinds of pop-ups in the browsers like that. So it's in every scenario something external trying to get you to click on a link inside the application that could install something malicious. Then, of course, there are external threats. Network-based attacks are always a problem, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Vulnerabilities can be exploited by tethering devices to external media. If you have somebody holding your device also, social engineering is often used to gain unauthorized access. And it can be used in different ways. It could be somebody just seemingly coming up to you with a harmful request to use their phone to call their wife because their battery died. However, then they have your number, and later on that day they use that to send you a text message that looks official, but it's actually not. And they get you to click on a link and either enter certain information or potentially download an application. So how do we protect mobile assets? Well, first there's MDM, or mobile device management. They require constant monitoring, so this allows you to control the content on the devices and restrict access to features if the device has potentially hazardous information on it. So if there's known malware in an application and that application is installed on a device, MDM can help remediate that and also block the user from accessing sensitive information until that's remediated, and also lock devices down so they're inaccessible if lost or stolen. App security is a big one. There's a bunch of third-party companies out there that can provide app ratings. As mentioned, there is antivirus programs that run, although they are limited in reach, especially compared to their desktop counterparts. So a combination of features, generally the public Play Store security measures, the public App Store security measures, as well as third-party rating systems can really help kind of give you the big picture of what's going on with applications that are on the market. And it's always a good idea to make sure that you don't install third-party applications from outside of those stores unless you 100% trust the people that they're coming from. And even in that scenario, it's always trust but verify. And of course, user training. Educating users on the threats that exist on the market that can impact them is always important. And you can always frame this in the context of their personal day-to-day usage as well. Threats that come out don't necessarily just impact the organization, they can impact a user's private data too, giving them access to sensitive documents and even their pictures on their camera roll. So I just want to make sure that we're up to date on our user education and making sure they understand where the threats lie on the market for mobile devices. What do the day-to-day operations look like for somebody who's handling mobile devices and is in charge of their security? Well, it's a lot to monitor. Hundreds of thousands of devices might exist in the environment, but much of the information can be digested by automated systems and action taken without much admin interaction. You always want to monitor the device operating system versions. Make sure that you're up to date on the operating system versions. This is especially important on mobile devices because generally, by and large, there's no individual patching features. So you don't go in and just patch the Wi-Fi hardware. You update the entire operating system, which includes fixes for vulnerabilities and bugs. You also want to monitor app installs and versions. Again, more important on operating systems that are mobile because you can't easily go back a version on an application once it's installed. You have to completely remove it and reinstall it if the old version is even available on the App Store anymore. If this isn't an application that you have direct access to and it comes from the iOS App Store or the Google Play Store, you're only going to have what's available via their market to install. And if that current version is buggy, you have to remove it from the device. You won't be able to roll back to an earlier version. Monitor and enforce encryption. This is always important. It's much easier to do nowadays as a lot of devices come encrypted out of the box, but you always want to add layers of security there and make sure that you're enforcing passcodes, and if available, that your users are leveraging those passcodes, and of course things like biometric for unlocking the device, whether that's a fingerprint or Face ID, for example. Distribute secure payloads. So it's always important to make sure that you have the payloads that you know are secure and you're distributing to those devices. Don't take payloads from third-party companies that you haven't vetted. You never want to take anybody at face value when they say their product is secure. Make sure, trust but verify. Automate compliance actions. This is a great one because it's so easy to do. If something happens where the device is vulnerable, if it's jailbroken, if device attestation fails, if an application is known bad is installed on the device, making sure that you can block the users from accessing sensitive information or even removing those malicious applications can be automated so that admins don't have to get involved, but they're still actively warned when those processes go through. Ensure proper NAC policies are enforced. Super important nowadays, especially with mobile devices. Mobile devices are often the starting point for ransomware attacks. Users carry these devices on them all the time, 24/7. They're used to them being in their pocket and picking up and looking at information at the drop of a hat, often causing them to click on links without properly verifying them or slowing down to think about what they're doing as they might when they're using their work desktop or laptop. So network access control can help make sure that only approved devices are accessing your network. Educate users regularly. We always want to stay up to date on everything that's going on in the market. It can seem like a lot, especially if you're juggling both iOS and Android devices in addition to your desktops and laptops, but education is key to a successful deployment. And of course, always update your contingency plans. What's going to happen if something massive infects devices across your environment? How soon can you shut down mobile devices from accessing your network, remove applications from them, or simply cut them off from secure resources? So always have a contingency plan in place. Again, even doing all of this day to day, no system is perfect. So you want to stay on top of it, stay on top of the app versions, the OS versions, and what your users are actually doing with these devices day to day. But once your admins have a rhythm down, I'm confident that it won't take too much time out of their day in order to monitor these devices and successfully keep them from infecting your larger networks should something go wrong.